There's a train a-comin'. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to it be Susan. You don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord, yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, hey, welcome back. This is New South Christians. I'm the host, David Fuqua, and do we have a treat today? This is the first person that we've had on the show that either wasn't a student or a former student. She's actually a faculty member here. This is Dr. Burton, and she's going to introduce herself in a minute. She's also my neighbor over in the Pickle Building. She's got a really easygoing spirit and personality, and the reason I asked her to come on this show was because we've done about maybe 15 or 20 episodes so far, and every person has talked about depression, anxiety, suicide. We've had a couple of people that have been institutionalized that shared that openly. And so I thought this might be right before spring break, a great time to kind of do a break, bring somebody on that has a background that can maybe make heads or tails out of what the heck's going on. And who knows, maybe this will actually create another podcast and we can go from there. So this is Dr. Burton. I'll let her introduce herself and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, so I'm a counseling psychologist, licensed mental health professional. So I've been in the mental health field for 20-some years now.
Wow.
I know. And my most recent work clinical experience was I was at Middle Tennessee State University, and I was there for 9 years, and I had a front row seat to college students' mental health issues.
Oh, so you've been around this.
I have.
Okay.
So at MTSU, they have a counseling center, and it's a free service to the students.
Yeah.
And it was short-term therapy where they would come in and for different issues. Depression, anxiety.
So what kind of things popped out? I mean, if you want to go ahead and get started, we'll get to Vol State in just a minute, but we're talking about Generation Z.
Correct.
And so obviously those were the people you were working with also. So we're comparing the same thing.
Yeah, I mean,
they come from a lot of the same demographic areas.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, when I first started, it probably would have been more millennials, but no, what you're saying is very true. It was the majority of the Gen Z. So anxiety and depression. So they were the most common problems I saw at the counseling center. It's the most common problem in the majority of counseling centers.
Well, before we get started, one of the things just to share with people before we came on this was talking about why doesn't Vol State have something? Because I used to be faculty speaker, and I remember when we came up for our SACS evaluation, Dr. Krista Mazza Carter, who used to be here in our division, that she pushed real strong for exactly what you were talking about, MTSU, but nobody seemed to want to do it. They were afraid of liability and the cost, I guess.
Yes, it's very expensive, and there's a lot of liability, and you have to be able to, if a student needs help after hours, if there's a lot, but we are fortunate that Vol State does have some counseling services available.
Oh, we do. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we do. So it is through, it's a couple of options. You can do telehealth counseling. So there are free services at Vol State.
I know we get telehealth through our health care.
No, this is actually a separate service for the students.
Really?
Yeah,
Man,
So,
Okay. Why am I a faculty member and I have no knowledge? Am I the only one that missed that meeting?
I think
what?
because I'm a psychologist, I know.
Okay.
Like, I'm much more, I'm more
but I'm serious.
The
faculty on campus, because
it has been emailed to us. We've been
told I'm going to fall on my sword. That's another email I failed to respond. Dean Gregory will be very happy to hear that, because it's not just her that I probably missed.
To be fair to you, it is new. It is a new development.
Is it new this year?
Yeah, it is new this year. So to be fair to you, it is a new development. So.
Well, can you describe it briefly? I guess we're starting at the rear end here.
Right. Well, that's
and we'll come back around.
So you would. There is an actual email that you contact at Vol State, and of course I am drawing a blank because I should have known that.
But the students get access to this.
They
now,
email.
Are they like me? Miss the email? Do they know?
So it's on the website. So
Okay.
at Ball State, it's under like counseling services, student support services. So it is there. It is
But
available.
what are you teaching this semester?
I'm teaching Introduction to Psychology
Okay.
and then Psychology 2130, which is lifespan development.
Okay, so in those classes, obviously students get to know you. You got a
Yeah.
great personality.
Thank you.
Everybody likes you.
Thank
I mean, you're very competent. So do they come to you a lot,
Mm-hmm.
like at the end of class, and say, I need some help or something? I mean, do you?
About-
they don't come to me in economics.
Right.
So.
About once a semester, there's one or two students that will come up and ask
Right.
for my help to get counseling or to
Okay.
have questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say about a couple a semester. So yes,
So what we've put together
it's
to make
working.
available, do you have any idea how many people? I mean, I
I
know we
don't.
boil everything down to numbers.
I don't
so-
because I think this is so new, but I absolutely give my students that information. Again, in my courses, we talk about mental health.
Okay.
So I think it's just different, David. Like,
Okay.
I'm aware of it. I teach it. So
Wow.
yeah.
Well, then, since you have the experience at MTSU that
Yeah.
I didn't realize,
Yeah.
I've done a great job getting to know you here.
It's okay. It's all right.
No, it's okay because it's about these people. It's not about me.
Yeah.
So the thing, well, then talk to me about what would you see at MTSU? What would be typical or what?
A lot of
I mean-
anxiety. So, kids, students, not kids, they're not kids, they're students, but
Okay.
students would be worried about a lot of the same things as our Vol State students. So I have to work to go to school. I can't sleep at night because I'm working a night shift, and then I have
Okay.
to get up for an 8 a.m. because it's the
Okay.
only time I can take the class. So the anxiety of how do I pay for college? How do I pay my bills? How do I get to school?
What-
How do I navigate that?
This is going to sound like a stupid question, but
Yeah.
how do I actually define anxiety? Because I think we've all been anxious in our life. I've had a test coming, so
Sure.
I've studied real hard. I'm prepared, but I'm worried I'm going to forget.
Yep.
That's classic anxiety
That's classic.
associated with college.
Right. So you
Okay,
can
well,
have a
we
sit-
all had that, right?
So you have a situational anxiety, like you
Okay.
just described. I've
All
got
right.
a very important test. I'm nervous. I've studied,
Okay.
but I'm nervous. That
All
would
right.
be a situation that is normal to feel anxiety.
Okay.
I'm 16. I'm taking my driver's license test. I have a big final. So anxiety disorder is when someone has a persistent feeling of anxiety
Okay.
in various situations.
So to be anxious about an upcoming test, I'm
That's
perfectly normal.
that's
and
expected
that's good
anxiety.
because I'm sure you had it just like I
course.
did.
We all get
But-
anxious.
So how do I treat a person that has that type of anxiety? Just like some
Right.
of us harsh people would say, old school,
Right.
buck it up, big boy. Pull
Right.
up your big boy pants and let's get it on. You know,
Right.
let's go forward.
And that's, I think, unfortunately, the problem is we have this myth in mental health that just suck it up. What do you have to be?
Yeah.
Excuse me. What
Bless
do
you.
you have to be anxious about?
Right.
And that old school approach. And so I think the first issue is you have to identify it, that
Okay.
it is a problem. It is impacting school and my relationships. And what you do about it is counseling.
Okay.
Counseling is very successful at treating anxiety.
So how
Yeah.
do I know we can't do everything that I want to talk about because there's things popping in my head
Sure.
right now.
Sure.
But if you're talking to me about that type of anxiety, my test, maybe some relationships, I'm working too much or whatever, trying to burn the midnight oil.
Yeah.
Because we look at the statistics of all state students, what percentage work so many hours, and a lot of students may not realize this. One of the reasons we don't go on Friday is because of what you were talking about. I was here when we used to go on Fridays. And then they looked at a lot of the data around the country, and most community college students were working, 35 hours a week, which is maybe 2.5 hours or 5 away from full time.
Exactly.
So most of our students are full time.
Sure.
So they are tired, et cetera. And so what they found is the days they work the most are Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Of course.
So the idea was, condense the courses Monday through Thursday, give everybody Friday off, and then because they got to work, because that's our demographic too,
Sure.
our socioeconomic. And so what we ended up with was that. So I guess the trade-off of giving you an extra day off is they're still working and they still have the anxiety.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think kudos to Ball State. Like I think it's brilliant. I think you are giving them a whole full day that they
Right.
can work their hours.
Right.
So again, unfortunately, in this economy, David, as you know, now they're not only working Friday, but they're still trying to get more hours on the weekend.
Yeah.
So unfortunately,
Yeah.
in the past, that could be a stopgap, but now it's not enough to pay for groceries. So they're having to
Wow.
add more hours, right?
So what
So
else
anyway.
at MTSU did you deal with? Because
So
I
to-
bet it goes from there to very strange, doesn't it?
It does. Like I've had
intense?
students that had bipolar disorder. They needed to go to the hospital. I've had students with severe depression. It really does, everything you would see, because MTSU is a very large college.
Oh, yeah.
So anything you would see in a city, in a small city, or, you would see it there. So anything from they were suicidal, we had to get them to the hospital, to I'm depressed because my girlfriend just broke up with me. You would see everything in between, which I think is true for Vol State.
So what's the volume like on it? How many people were in the department that actually handled? Because I know MTSU's population is up to 20,000 plus. And when you do graduate school, evening students, and put it all together.
Trying to remember, I think when I left MTSU, it was a solid staff of 7 full-time counselors.
And busy pretty much all the time.
Yeah, we did. We saw students 5 days a week from 8. Our center was open from 8 to 4. It still is 8 to 4:30.
Wow.
Yep.
So how do you think Vol State's would look? You think we'd pack it out?
That's such a good question. No, that is such an interesting question. I think it would
really
be used. I think there would be students seeking services. Yes,
let me tell you something. What I know about the faculty here, including myself, I think we'd be at the front of the line. Which brings me to another quick question. Are those services, because I know through our healthcare, we get telehealth and other mental health options.
Yes, it is just for students.
So it is just for students, okay.
I got my doctorate degree at Ball State, which is in Indiana. Not Ball State, but Ball State.
They keep wondering about that doctorate program at a 2-year school.
At Ball State, right? No, Ball.
TBR will start knock on the door in a minute. You'll be drug off.
I'll be fired. What do you mean you got your doctorate at Ball State?
End of your tenure track. Yeah. All right, go ahead.
Anyway, so they actually had a fully independent counseling center. They saw faculty. They saw staff. They saw students. They were open nights.
Jeez.
It was a great place to get a doctorate, because I got to work there as an intern and really get exposure.
So we're way behind the curve.
Well, I wouldn't say that, David. Community colleges don't typically have counseling centers.
Well, we can't be all things to all people, because we're very limited in the funding that we get. We're very limited in a lot of ways.
Sure,
But this is just kicking into my head, though, but I know statistically nationwide, 51% of college students are community college students. So it's not the exception. It splits pretty much 50-50. So, and if you go to states like Florida and California, their community colleges are massive. So
absolutely.
it's, Tennessee's model is not the national model, so it's very different. So if we, like I said, so if we had services like that, I mean, with the money, I know people say the financial part, because you'd have to hire these people full-time, or TBR would have to step up and expand, which costs the taxpayers money.
Well, I mean, you're talking full-time counselors. You've got to pay them a livable wage that's competitive, and you have to have a director. You have to have an assistant director, or at least a director.
Well, that brings me a quick question. Was it hard to find people for these positions at MTSU? Because I know we're notorious low payers.
No,
and I don't know a lot about the field, so I don't know.
It was a great gig. Let me tell you, as a psychologist, I loved the College Counseling Center, because it was short-term therapy. So no, I mean, we got people, because I actually got a contract where I had summers off, because of course people are on campus in the summers.
I didn't even think about it. I think of you as faculty here, so.
Yeah, 10-month contract. At the time, which was a great gig for me, because I had kids.
I imagine a lot of people, that's like a benefit.
If you have young kids.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you have young kids or whatever,
So anyway, and it's also just a great gig, because in the summers it's very less busy. So your job is not as stressful. Of course, the payback is, this time of year. March to May, you're hopping. You don't stop. And then October to December, your hair's on fire, because that's when students are in crisis. So.
Yeah, and they're coming to college, many of them for the first time, so they're having to deal with all that. And then in a 4-year school, you got them dorms, apartments, the financial stress of that, and the things that go with them. Well, a couple other things, then we'll move on to some weird topics. I had to make sure we had those.
Sure.
When you start talking about working with young people in that age group, is that really fun? I mean, I know you like teaching, so I'm assuming I already know your answer. But is it fun to work with them, or is it kind of sad because they're young and they have these issues?
Oh, it's the best in population I've ever worked with.
Really?
When I started, I wanted to work with kids. My whole goal was to work with the little kids and their families.
Okay.
And then when I got this job at MTSU, I had little kids. I mean, Jake was only 5, and I remember going, college students like, I don't know about this. And I fell in love with it. I think
Really?
what is so exciting about college students is they're young enough for change. They're malleable enough. But they can have insight and awareness. And if they come in, mama's not telling them, daddy's not. They're there because they want to be there.
And they're adults.
And they're adults. And I love this population.
So
I love
do you
it.
ever run into like the conflict? I'm thinking because
Yeah.
I know that they're legal, so you don't have to talk to their parents.
Correct. Well, you
and I know
can't.
that.
Yeah.
But is there a lot of conflict? I mean, because a lot of these young people probably have never been to counseling.
Right.
This is their first opportunity.
Yes.
Do they enjoy it, or is there a negative stigma like, hey, you're going over to see Dr. Burton in the counseling office? Is there something weird? You know, my generation, if you were going to counseling, you were viewed as there was something wrong with you.
Absolutely. And that's a great point, David, about this generation. They are so open to therapy.
Right.
And that stigma is so much more removed.
Right.
And, to MTSU's absolute credit, the director was fabulous. And one of her main missions was to give college students a really good experience in therapy. They might only come in 3 times, but when they walk out the door, they've had a positive experience with mental health.
So this generation doesn't view it negatively at all.
I don't think so.
Do you think parents of these kids view it negatively? I mean, you don't get any kind of blowback like a parent shows up. Why'd you tell my kid this?
Right, no.
Because like I said, they are adults.
They are adults,
Like if a parent came to me now, why is my student doing poorly in your class? I'd say, ma'am, I'd be respectful, obviously.
Of course.
But
you can't talk about it.
He's an adult. She's an adult. I have to talk to her first.
I think a lot of these parents are my generation, you know, and I think there is still that the parents don't want to admit it, they don't see it, or they have their own myths and stereotypes about mental health.
Or does it reflect, do they think sometimes it reflects poorly on them being a parent?
Absolutely. Or they are struggling with their own mental health and they just,
they got their own issues, right?
Right, and they don't even really recognize depression or anxiety in themselves. And then the kid grows up, well, I'm just like mama. And, good, meaning parents that love their children
something
just don't realize it.
Popped into my head funny, and you wouldn't know this. My sister lives in California. It's been there forever and ever, married a guy from California, and I could tell you all the other things that make her classic California. But the one is, everybody in her family are in counseling and have been for decades upon decades. And when she comes home to visit, she always looks around at the family here and goes, all of you are in deep need of some serious therapy. So in California, there's no stigma at all. In fact, if you're not going to counseling, there's a stigma.
So well, and then of course we could talk about the whole, living in the South. And what are the...
I was hoping you would, because this show is called New South Christians, and what we've been talking about is not just the impact on people that moved here from other parts of the country, but the very Gen Z that we're talking about therapy, are the very ones that a lot of people think are changing the church in ways. Some believe it's good, some believe it's not so good, but it is changing. This isn't the conservative South. And you're from originally where? Cave?
Kentucky.
Hey, Cave.
Horse Cave.
Yeah, Horse Cave. There you go. So I think
very
we
rural.
Can stereotype you a lot faster than anybody else.
Not a lot of mental health services in rural Kentucky.
So Horse Cave isn't the epicenter of
not a lot of therapy offices.
Deep counseling.
Great place to grow up. Loved growing up there. Not a lot of mental health.
But what's creepy in cave stays in cave.
That's right. That's
there
right.
You go.
Anyway, but yes. But I think though, David, it's just true nationally. There still are stigmas about mental health. It's not just the South.
Wow. Well, that's good. Well, listen, with the time we have left, because this is a great introduction, but I can already tell you, if you don't do your own podcast, we're going to have you back. And I'm going to batten down on my research. I just think it'd be fantastic. I really do.
So, there's a need. There's a need for mental health education.
So I typed these on before I came over here because I knew I was obviously going to be talking to you. Now, I'm not going to try to, catch you off guard or anything.
Sure.
But these are just some of the things that I typed in, like Gen Z mental health counseling. Why does Gen Z need this? Why does Gen Z seem to be so depressed? Why are they so suicidal? Because like I said, and the people that have helped with this podcast, Stanley and everybody else, I mean, we all look at each other. Everybody that comes in here talks about that and they leave. I had no idea. Absolutely no idea. So I typed in one of the sites said technology and social media are 2 of the primary causes.
Correct.
So technology, what do you mean? I'm on the computer all the time, or?
So it's social media. So if you look at the smartphone, and when kids started having it, and you look at rates of depression and anxiety, they both go
direct
together.
correlation.
Oh,
huh?
yeah, for
Wow.
sure. And so if anybody's out there interested in, there's a fabulous documentary called The Social Dilemma.
Oh, I watched it a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and in fact,
Fantastic.
my students, it's very eye-opening.
Makes me angry.
Yes.
Very angry.
And so I talk to my psychology students all the time, and I say, you're walking around with 100% distraction in your pocket 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
It's a dopamine feeder.
Absolutely.
It just feels amazing to just do this. And so, David, I would say it is the number one. I think mental health professionals would agree. It's the social media, it's the attacks, it's the comments, it's the fear of missing out. It's there was a party and I wasn't invited. Why wasn't I invited? And it goes on and on and on. It's comparison.
Yeah, I had a young man on here, nice-looking guy, smart, had him in class, good sense of humor. He's going to go to Western, your old school. And, he got on here and started talking about, I'm lonely.
Sure.
I suffer from loneliness. And
Absolutely.
I'm going, how are you lonely? I mean, I don't see that. I don't feel it. And then he started articulating it. And he pointed out that people that you say you're friends with on social media, they're not my friends.
Exactly.
And we talked about my biggest complaint as an instructor, professor, ask anybody that's had me. I hold up the phone the first day and go, this is the devil. This is the thing that possesses you. It's not like I'm the greatest professor you're ever going to have, but for an hour and 25 minutes, I have a passion to lead you, to explore not what to think, but how to think, and then use it. And if you could just put that damn phone up, we could do it. But within a week, I look back out, and they just touching it. They just, I mean, my gosh, is the social dilemma right? It was wired that way, wired into our thinking.
Yeah,
so,
because it's a dopamine feeder.
Okay.
It
Well, then
feels
how do you-
good
how
when
do
we
you-
do it.
Other than me having to threaten them, which I don't want to do. I don't like that. I don't like the whole vibe in class.
Right.
And a lot of them are really good. They'll
respectful.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
But how do we as professors,
Yeah. I think what I tell my students is your cell phone you have to have a relationship. You have to figure out how to be in control of this.
Right.
And so we talk about basic things like, if you can only be without your phone for 15 minutes, then I want you to try it for 20. You go put it in another room. I mean, that basic.
But you just made me think of something else. Instead of just a podcast talking to prospective students, what about the faculty? We've never addressed this issue. We've never come together and tried to seek out what's the right way to do this. And I guarantee you, everybody struggles with it. I'm not the only one.
Oh, well, you make a great point that look at the parents. Like, we're on our kids, but we're just on it as well.
Oh, my God.
The parents have their face in it, too.
I was talking to one young man. We were talking about, like, dinner. The traditional date, you're over there, wide-eyed, looking at the person of the opposite sex. All the kind of dopamine from that. I mean, you're excited. That, to me, is normal. But then I look over at the table, you're at Olive Garden, and there's a young man over there doing this, and young women over here doing this.
Sure.
Hell, they're not even talking to each other. Well, then you look at the family over there, and they're doing the same thing.
Think about it being on a date, being a young person. You're a little anxious. You're a little uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
You pull out that phone. It's become a pacifier.
But why isn't that not considered a slap in the face of you as a prospective date or a current date?
Because it's their norm. Because being on their phones is just it's like a third arm. It's just they all do it, right?
If I went back in a time machine and I pulled out this device when I was on a date with a person, the woman would be, you don't have time to talk to me?
You don't have time to talk
this
to me.
date's over.
This date's over. But this is their...
That is so different. That is just too wild.
And it's their norm. And like I tell my class, this has become so normal. And don't think that just because it seems normal means it is, right? So just because you're on your phone 6 to 8 hours a day, that's not okay.
Yeah.
I don't care
they
if
were talking
everyone
about
else is
you
too.
were pretty close on the number. Then it was about 5.5 hours per day.
Yeah, that's what my students
is
tell
what
me.
people are on social media
Correct.
and technology.
I have them all write
And you
paper.
think they're working 35 hours. I mean, we can
That's
sit here and
correct.
start breaking down.
That's
I'm working
correct.
35 hours. I'm sleeping. I've got to eat. I've got to do this. And then, bam, the rest of my time on the social media.
Right.
I mean, what's left?
every semester, my students do a reaction paper, and it's either on social dilemma or digital addiction, and I read these papers. And paper after paper, they're telling me I'm on my phone between 4 to 6 hours a day. So when I talk to my students, I say, don't tell me you don't have time to study or exercise or go out with your friends because you're spending 4 to 6 hours a day on your phone.
Wow.
So let's try to get that down to 1 or 2.
Yeah. You know, something else, without going into details, because I promise you I wouldn't do this, is I also started looking up under relationships.
Right.
Their definition of what's a relationship is a little, I don't want to say freaky. Yes, let's just say different. That's Is that me being non-judgmental?
Yeah,
not non-judgmental, and so I'm fitting with the vibe, right? I'm not judging anybody.
Yeah. I'm just not up on the relationship status of young folk.
Well, all I know is every time I
different.
read something, I go, that sounds a little on the freaky side, you know.
It's a little different.
It's
different.
Very different.
No, dating absolutely is different, and then you bring in the whole.
But
social
dating
media and the
apps,
phone.
I guess, too. You know, I mean, my gosh.
Tinder.
Yeah. Hitting the swipe.
It's a whole new world with
Yeah.
these kids and how they date and what they view with sex and relationships. Yeah.
Well, and you might not have done research on this yet, but are we headed toward good marital family relationships? I know the data's probably not out there yet because this wave is just coming.
Yeah, David, I don't know. But yeah, they're studying it, I'm sure. Like they're looking at this generation and how they're doing in marriage and relationships.
Well,
we know marriage is people are getting married later.
Yes.
We know that from research, you know, and we know that.
There's a really famous, I don't know if she was a sociologist, but her name's Helen Fisher. She wrote a book called The Anatomy of Love.
Yeah.
And I bought it years ago. I used to use it in economics class. It's got a lot of humor in it, but it's got a lot of real serious stuff. And when I was reading through it, thinking about this, the relationship type design, she talked about a thing called the love map, that when children are young, who's the first relationship they see? It's mom and dad. So if mom and dad are dysfunctional, not very touchy, not very warm, friendly, it translates on to the next one.
Correct.
And so I'm got to thinking about love maps, and I'm thinking about who's been on this podcast, all the things they've shared, what you've just shared with me today. And I'm going, man, is the love map going to be traditional, like the traditional Bible Belt was conservative?
Right.
It's changed. So now are the relationships and the love map of this generation going to totally redefine marriage and what's a good mom and a good dad?
Wow, and
I don't have a clue.
I can go on and on, David, because let me tell you, I teach development, and one thing we start out when your kids are babies, it's called serve and return. And serve and return interaction. Okay. So that means when the baby can't talk, obviously, but the mom is like, look at you. Look at you, sweet baby. And the baby's like, ah. And serve and return actually builds the neural connections in the brain.
Oh, okay.
It starts this relationship between mother and baby. And what's going on when the baby's quiet and mom's on the phone. Right. So the mom is doing this instead of, hello, sweetheart.
Oh, man.
And so just these fundamentals of a relationship between the baby and the parent, this is where we're starting.
So if you get a whole lot of that,
you're not doing this with your babies.
So what would a relationship possibly end up looking? So what's coming down the road that'll show up in your counseling center at Vol State?
Right. Well, I think it's if you're having a distant parent, you're having a parent that is not engaged with you. You're learning that this is what we do instead of this is what we do. If you have families that are no longer doing the family dinner, and instead of the family dinner, we're all in front of our screens, you're not communicating, you're not talking, you're not learning basic social skills, right?
So now I got a bad feeling.
It's going to be a ripple effect, you know? It's like with my kids, you're talking 20 years ago, I knew where it was going. I knew if I didn't get my kids in sports on some level, they wouldn't go outside and play and get exercise because they were already starting on the computer games. And I had to be proactive. And how many parents are like, you've got to teach your kids social skills. You have to teach your kids how to interact.
Now that's another thing you get on this podcast is the number of people in class. MTSU has had to create the Dale Carnegie course. He's a famous guy known for sales.
Of course.
But they built a class for the business majors to teach them how to be social, how to communicate, how to talk.
Sure.
I mean, like networking, it can be on technology, but basic old school networking is I go into a room full of 50 people and I'm trying to network and promote myself.
Yeah.
And I've got people, why are you calling on me? Because you're in class. It's called the Socratic method. It's one of the tools we use to enhance your verbal skills and critical thinking. I mean,
Exactly.
why are you calling on me? I'm just like, whoa.
Exactly.
And so a lot of
For sure.
people, like fighting the cell phone fight, they give up the calling on you fight.
Exactly.
And so I guess we're kind of like those parents. We just kind of put up a few PowerPoints, distract them long enough to say we had a lecture and hit the road.
Well, I mean,
That's me being cruel.
Right,
But I'm at the
right.
end of my career and I have
know,
tenure,
David,
so I can tell the truth.
I know, but like one thing I like to do in my development class is we
Yeah.
have group discussion, and
Yeah.
and a big part of that is I want them engaging with each other.
But they like that.
And they like that.
Yeah.
They're like, we like this. And I think they yearn for it. It's just they don't get it. But college is a great place in our classroom. You know, that's how I try to affect change is let's talk to each other in small groups.
Yeah.
Not every student loves it. I
Yeah.
mean, but the majority, I think, do. So
Wow.
anyway,
Well-
it's complicated.
Well, a couple more things, then we'll
Yeah,
wrap up,
sure,
because
yes.
there's more things popping in my head than I can even imagine. I wish I had looked up.
Yeah.
The thing about friendships, we were talking about it on the way over here, and not to be controversial, but
Yeah.
there have been a lot of really academic people on a lot of talk shows
Yeah.
talking about how this generation doesn't have sex anymore either, particularly young men. And they
Yeah.
were talking about what it does to them.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's part of our process that we go through.
Yeah.
And we're not making judgments about when you should have sex out
Right.
of marriage or in marriage or whatever.
Right.
But it just seems like their whole dating, pursuit of the opposite sex,
Yeah.
can't engage, can't talk. We were looking at 8 of 10 women say they've been victims of sexual harassment.
Right, right.
Women are graduating at rates far greater than men in college and have been for quite a while and now, are overproducing men in high school academically. In other words, it's
Yeah.
like the male is fallen from the perch and headed downhill. And even in the church, these are some statistics I haven't shared with you. You know, women were always the rock in church, and now more women are leaving church than ever before.
Well, there are a lot of people are leaving church.
Well, I know, but
Men and
when the
women.
women leave, we got a real
Trouble.
problem.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's like, I don't know, it's like, and I'm not alarmist, I'm an optimist at heart, but ever since I've been doing this podcast, I just get the feeling that our basic institutions are falling apart.
They're changing.
And they're changing,
They are.
and we have got to do a better job of helping these people
Change.
at this stage
Exactly.
to do, because
Yes.
what are their civic virtues and values going to be? What are their morals going to be?
Exactly.
You know, where do they get them from? Well, kind
Exactly.
of like the love map, they get them from us, but these people are, there's like 80-something million of them, largest generation ever. They're the ones that are going to redefine. There might be some old guy like me on here 20, 30 years from now saying, well, you know, back in 2024, you know, it all changed. So, you know,
Right,
what,
right.
all right, so before we end, so what are we going to do?
What are we going to do?
Okay,
You know,
there you go.
I think you're right with men and young men, our culture, and never to dismiss, like there are been such great changes and empowering women, and
Yes.
we need all that. But at the same time, men need to be okay with being a man. You know, I have a
I know
son.
they talk about going out on a date, and the woman
Right.
is angry.
Right.
And he's
Right.
never even been out with her before,
Right.
but she's an angry woman
Right, or
because
on guard,
well,
or you know.
And not to bash the Me Too movement. A lot of them say, you know,
Yeah, of
they,
course.
I mean, they weren't blind. They looked at the Me Too movement.
Well, of
It's like they
course.
say this is one of my favorite things they'll say on
Yeah.
a date. You might be asked a series of questions like you're on an interview.
Yeah,
And if you don't give the
yeah.
right answer, it's over. Hey, we're off the cell phone now because we're hitting the road.
Right, right. I think what is unfortunate is that I think it's a new set of rules.
Okay.
And if men are made to be the villain
Okay.
from the get-go,
Yeah.
that isn't fair to all men.
So that's not gonna work out,
and that's
is it?
not going to work
Okay.
either. And so I think
right.
we just have to understand that all men aren't bad, and
Okay.
you know, we have to let our daughters
All
know
right.
that. So yeah.
All right,
absolutely.
so before we leave, if we've come to
Yeah.
any conclusion,
Yeah.
the one we can agree on for sure is we need counseling.
And to add that we have them at Volunteer
Yeah,
State.
we have it, so we need
have
to
it.
communicate what we've got.
Yes,
We could
absolutely.
probably
It's on
do
the
better
website.
with it, expand on it as far as that goes.
Ideally, in
And
a
we
perfect
probably need a
world.
Dr. Burton podcast.
I don't know,
at
David.
least weekly, that deals with these issues, right?
Listen, I think it's a great conversation to have. It's always a good
Absolutely.
idea to say
Okay.
anxiety and depression is on the rise.
Okay.
It doesn't make you abnormal. It just makes you with a lot of people struggling. And it's
All right.
real. And what's the exciting thing is if you can get some support and counseling, you can navigate it when you're younger.
Sure.
You're setting up your life for success.
right.
Yeah, that's the positive part.
Woo! Well, I'll tell you what, I have had more fun than I thought I would have, and I'll tell you, I've got about 1,000 things in my head that I wish I'd already asked, but we'll definitely have her back. So anyway, we just wanted to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, particularly with this subject, be sure to share it with somebody else or just approach us. We're both on campus, very approachable
Yep.
people,
Yep.
and we'll be glad, and I promise you I'm going to educate myself on this after this is over.
Yes,
So.
I will send you the emails.
Yeah. Well, anyway, God bless you. Have a good spring break. Be careful out there. And thanks for joining us.
People get ready, there's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to it be, Susan. You don't need no ticket.